Okay, folks, we are back, and if you're watching live and have been here since earlier, apologies for the crazy technical difficulties we've been having. This is take 2 of our Exorcist, I almost said exorcism, this is take 2 of our exorcism, of our Exorcist commentary. We spent about 15 minutes basically reviewing the film, and then we started watching it, and we had a good conversation. I thought we made a lot of good points. That could have been the video. Heck, it might end up being the video. I have made that unlisted, and I might take that footage and try to put it somewhere later so that people can see it. I'm sure a lot of the things that we said will come back if we actually get to continue and do the commentary. I don't know why I'm having bandwidth issues. This has not been a problem for a long time for us, and I'm having flashbacks to periods. Sorry, I'm just looking at the comments here to see if we're still having issues with. Oh, okay. People were talking about the previous stream. Sorry, I got worried for a second when somebody said something about it being cursed, but it said the stream cursed us, and that freaked me out for a second. Yeah, this movie, didn't even freak me out as much as the weirdness of the stream. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's been a weird night. If you weren't here earlier, we started late already because one of my twin daughters got real sick, and I guess ironic is not the right word, but just like the girl in this started throwing up, and it was really weird timing that I was dealing with that just right before we're doing this. So anyway, we're going to try to watch the movie. I'm going at it from a different source in case HBO Max was the problem, so I went ahead and rented it on Amazon. We'll see if that works out. Hopefully that wasn't a wasted rental. But we're going to start right into it. People have been waiting on us for an hour now, and I'm sorry about that. Apologies, I feel bad, but we're gonna get going again. And Austin, hopefully a lot of the stuff we were talking about earlier wins its way back into this conversation. I'm sure it would, but I'm not going to do any more preamble. We're just going to get right into it. So timestamp 0, get ready to press play when I say now. We implore you to watch it with us, but we'll be talking a lot, and hopefully Austin is doing lots of the talking because he knows a lot more about this movie than I do. I've now watched it once over the last couple of days and haven't had a lot of time for my feelings and thoughts to percolate, but hopefully some ideas will come to me as we go along. This is a real big movie for me to not know anything about and finally watch at 39 years old, but I'm glad.
Yeah, it's very dense. There's something that I think the writer in general just has, because I think Exorcist 3 took me 2 viewings to fully grasp everything that was going on.
Yeah, well, like we said earlier, if you weren't here for that, it's a movie that's pretty simple in its overall plot that has a whole lot of interesting details and things going on. But we'll talk about it as we go. Here we go. Yep. Everybody, please press play. Hold on, I got switch my audio over. I'm not gonna make that mistake again.
That's probably what screwed us.
That's what it was.
YouTube was like, no, they're playing.
I like your theory that it's this movie. This is a cursed movie that, or people are very superstitious about this movie. That a lot of people died in the making of it, or around the making of it, et cetera, et cetera.
So stream, right. The power of Susan Wojcicki compels you. Let us stream.
Here we go. Everybody, please press play right now. Fingers crossed, folks. The very first thing we need to do is go back to Chewbacca's Lover Super Chat.
Yes, he
left us a $10 Super Chat right before we started, and I read it, but we didn't get a chance to really discuss it. So why don't you read that for us again, if you would?
Oh, and he put it in the chat again, so I don't have to go through my photos.
Oh, yeah, so, what a nice guy.
Back then, the swearing and all the vile things she said really bothered people. Now we are too desensitized that people would laugh. You hear that language from children in comedies now.
It's the context of it
that's what I think.
And the specific order of words and the fact that there's nothing but, for the most part, horrible, profane, awful things being said by the devil and out of that mouth, because in the context of the movie, these are people who do not speak that way. if this movie was made now, you might hear random people on the street just throwing out F-bombs willy-nilly. But I hear what you're saying, that people are desensitized to that kind of language, and you're right. Some immature kids might see this movie and just immediately think that, I don't know how to quote any of it on this channel. But
and I think even now, I don't know that we would go to the C word as much as this movie goes to.
That's true too. But it is true that the F-bombs were more shocking. The sea suckers and all of that. That's all shocking back then in a way that it's not here. The whole situation, the whole premise, the green slime coming out of somebody's mouth, the fact that it's a demonic possession story in a world where a lot of people, profess to be Christians and Catholics and feel like they live in a Christian nation and all of that, that is all much, much more shocking at this point, to the point where there were whole areas of the country that tried to, keep this movie from being played, and it was very controversial and stuff. But I still think that if you're a mature, thinking, feeling person, especially if you're an adult, especially if you have kids, and I'm going to try not to, throw the kid card out a lot as if this movie means more to me than it does other people because I'm a father, but I had a different experience with it than I would have if I saw it younger, certainly.
And I imagine this is one of the scariest movies to a parent.
Yeah, absolutely. So all I'm saying is those things were shocking to me, even being more desensitized to some of that language because of the context of the story.
Yeah.
And because I was fully taken in by it.
I don't think Halloween's lost its bite just because we have more graphic, violent things now. I think it still works as a piece, but you will always have people who can't put themselves into the perspective when it came out that will laugh at it. That is just a fact, which I experienced. I got to see this in the drive-in on my birthday, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and I took my younger sister and one of her friends, and they were both, I think, 17, and they were riffing the movie the entire time, and I wanted to strangle them.
Yeah. So I mean that certainly gives credence to Chewbacca's lover's point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think some of that too just comes down to maturity as well.
Well, and with anything, if you don't, sit down with the movie and engage with it and give it a shot, you know what I mean? If you start talking about it and riffing from the very beginning, if we had done a blind commentary on this, it would not have affected me the same way it did last night, even if I was taking it seriously and not making fun of it the whole time. You know what I mean?
Look, this isn't a movie you should talk through the first time you see it.
It's definitely not, and I'm glad that we didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to mention, and I knew, of course, that there was no way this was possible, but I didn't know who was in this movie at all, and it's mostly no-namers at the time, of course. Max von Sydow was the one actor that I really knew from very much, and when I first saw him, I didn't even recognize him.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, Michael Caine was not that old in 1973. That was the first thought I had.
Oh, that's really funny. No, and he's got old age makeup that looks really good in this, because he's also not that old.
Is it old age makeup?
Yeah, it is.
It's spectacular then. Oh, you know what? Now that you say that, I looked at some excerpts from reviewers, and one of them was Pauline Kael, and she didn't like the movie at the time. This is contemporarily, of course, but she gave it huge praise for that makeup. What's impressive about it to me is that I know what he looks like as an old man, and they nailed it.
No, exactly.
He basically just looks like he does in Force Awakens.
No, exactly. He looks exactly like that. To the point where I was like, oh, he's just, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, he's just one of those guys that got old really quick, I guess. And then, I found out that it was just makeup.
That's a thing we used to do with, I guess, just really skilled actors that we thought were right for parts, regardless of age. And I commend projects for that when you hire people that are just, right for it in their personality and what they bring to it emotionally, and if they don't quite look the part, you can make that work. Some people think that that's bad for all kinds of representation. I respectfully disagree with that, and in there's exceptions, but in most contexts, but what's interesting about it is, I mean, it's just not really a thing that we do anymore. And so you'll go back to old movies and you'll be like, God, that guy was just always old.
No, my favorite thing like that, more recently, because this is like a few years old now, but is in the show Midnight Mass. They cast a younger actress as an elderly character, and at first it was really distracting because I picked up on it right away, and then it ended up being really important to the story.
Well, that's the only time we do it now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Robert says it feels counterintuitive. They couldn't just cast an old guy. I mean, that's true, and he says, but the performance and makeup is fantastic. I'd love to know what the casting process was for him. I know that, like with a lot of things with this movie, there was a lot of turmoil there where like different people in the production couldn't agree on who to cast for things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we almost got like Audrey Hepburn is the main actress.
Oh, interesting.
And Jane Fonda, who said no because it was just a capitalist cash grab.
Wow, interesting.
Actual quote, yeah.
Was she Catholic?
I don't know. Because
I know that was a Catholic perspective from a lot of people of that religious persuasion, where there were a lot of people writing like, if exorcisms were real or are real, this isn't the way they would be, and I'm like, I mean, I don't know how you'd know, but they claimed that the movie was too like sensational about it, and like didn't like that you have to have one of the priests ultimately just start like punching whoever has the demon, and I'm like, there's more going on in that scene than that. That is disingenuous.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's very disingenuous.
That was the devil getting to him. And he losing himself and forgetting who he's dealing with, and that there's a little girl there that he needs to protect. Like that's what's going on in that scene.
Yeah, no, because he's coming from a place of weakness that it's preying on.
Okay, let's talk about what we're actually seeing here, and then we can get back to the conversation that we had in the previous stream about the soundtrack and tubular bells and all of that. That's a hard word to say. Because that was kind of my one of my only complaints with this was how that song was used in the soundtrack, and I didn't even realize that it wasn't made for this until you mentioned that to me. But anyway, do you think that this opening is a little long in the tooth, and that we don't need all of this Iraq stuff? And can you explain to me, besides just introducing this character, why all of this is here?
I think it's just supposed to be not just him, but also setting up the demon, because this is supposed to be the demon that possesses Reagan, and there's like kind of hints that there's like a little bit of a rivalry between the two of them, and they mentioned that he's performed an exorcism before. And
so they're like arch nemesis. I thought maybe that's what was going on, but with only one viewing, obviously, as I'm watching this without the rest of the movie, I don't have any idea what I'm looking at.
No, exactly, and that's something that I like, is that it doesn't feel the need to like really paint that picture. It just lets you infer. But I agree that with what you're saying, that like on a first viewing, it was probably hard to kind of realize how that fits into the puzzle. Especially because I think it's easy to forget that this is the opening for a large stretch of it.
Yeah, well, it becomes such a character piece.
Yeah, exactly.
And also,
he doesn't come back until so late in the game.
Yeah, it's only like 7 or 8 minutes, and it felt a little longer as I was in it the first time around, just because and I wasn't bored. It's just wrapping me up in atmosphere. It feels like it's developing lore potentially, or that maybe that's the direction it's going. I mean, like it's almost like it almost feels like treasure hunty or Indiana Jones or something, but like with a with kind of a creepy bent. You don't know what you're looking at, and it's just somebody investigating ruins or whatever.
No, it absolutely has that like archaeology feel. With him finding the head of the little statue and then the bigger one.
Yeah, the thing I really appreciated about it when that character came back, because I didn't know who he was obviously until he returns later, and I wasn't really waiting for him. Like you said, you kind of forget about it. But in the back of my mind, I was kind of occasionally going, okay, yeah, but what about that opening? What was that? And then we finally get back to it. Pretty tightly woven story overall. But one big and I mentioned this earlier when we had to shut the stream down. Pardon me. We were screaming and we had to shut it down. I was constantly or periodically, I should say, thinking about Poltergeist as I was watching this movie. And obviously, this had to have been very influential on that. That only comes out like a decade after this.
Yeah, around that, I would think. This is 73.
Yeah, and it's a somewhat similar situation in that you have a little girl that's not being possessed, but that's in peril, and there's a supernatural force that has its hands on her. It has her in its grip, right? And she's taken out through a lot of the movie instead of being the big, scary force throughout it, of course. But I kept thinking about that, and then when he shows back up at the end, or in the third act,
it's like the expert person in Poltergeist.
Yeah, and that made me think, oh man, the Poltergeist should have opened introducing her because she comes out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would have been interesting.
It might have been cool if it opened with her like coming out of a house cleaning or something. But maybe not reveal too much. Maybe don't give you a sense of the supernatural yet. Because what I appreciate about this opening is there's a slight hint at... I'm knocking stuff over on my desk here. There's a slight hint at the supernatural, maybe, just in, like the growling with the dogs barking and everything. You don't know if you're actually hearing dogs or if it's like, the subtle rumblings of a demon or something with that statue. But there's not any reason to assume that it's definitely a supernatural force. And you could have done the same thing with Poltergeist and like really ramped up to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's one of the things that this movie does really well is just how it amps up everything, and it slowly gets more and more out there. While you start in like more of a realistic, like a realistic, grounded place, and by the end you're getting full head flips.
Austin.
Yeah,
I'm gonna cut down to. Apparently, we're buffering again a little bit. Hopefully, we can make this thing work. But I might need you to.
Fella says the audio's fine.
I might need you to read super chats for me.
Oh yeah.
Because I'm gonna go down to one screen here, and I'm not gonna be able to see them as well. I'm gonna try to open this in a different.
Yeah, well, I got
window.
Chat here too, so if you need to close that, I can keep track of it.
Cool, but anyway, in your view.
Yeah.
What do you think, or do you have any guesses, any speculation as to what the movie she's shooting is about?
I think it's like a college movie that's. I mean, that's like some of the only information we get, but they're trying to tear down the college, so I guess it's. From her perspective, she wants to save it.
Yeah, what is the protest about exactly? Like, why do they want to shut the college? Does it have anything to do with Vietnam? That's the big question I have.
Possibly.
Is it a social? Is it like a social commentary of Vietnam thing? Because a lot of people want to read Vietnam subtext into this movie in general, and they like to cite that scene because there's a protest, but you don't know what, even in the context of the fake movie, the protest is really about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know that they're wanting to shut that college down, but... Okay, so this is the first we get of the theme, which I didn't realize was just a song that they took.
Mm-hmm.
It was the only thing I knew about this movie, and I guess I didn't know very much about it because I didn't realize that it even pre-existed the film.
I don't think most people know that, though, to be fair. Like,
I found it as a kid because we put together a like a haunted house in my house for Halloween when I was in high school, and we got a disc of Halloween music, and that track was on it, and it always really grabbed me. You know, it was there with stuff like the Child's Play theme, the Halloween theme, and stuff, and it's one of my favorite bass lines in anything.
Oh, that's a wonderful track. Absolutely. I recommend looking up like the full thing, Cap, because it's really good.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I've heard the whole song, and again, I think the majority of it, if not all of it, is in the credits in this movie.
Well, and I think because while I was waiting between streams, I looked up the album, and the album just says it's got 2 tracks, Tubular Bells and Tubular Bells Part 2, and it's like a 50-minute album.
Oh, I didn't know it was that long. Okay, because
so I think it's just like a really huge piece of music.
Because people in the comments earlier were saying that they only used like a small clip of it here, and I thought they meant it just used like the little 30-second clip that you hear in the movie proper, but you get a lot more of it in the credits.
Well, I have the soundtrack,
but I guess it's a lot longer.
They just have the 30-second clip. And I didn't watch through the credits last night when I rewatched it, so I'll have to pay more attention to that this time.
Yeah, I think it's really awkward the way the music's handled at the end of the film. Like you get 15, 20 seconds of it, and then it cuts to original score for this movie, and then it cuts back to it in the credits.
Yeah.
It's very awkward. It's one of the only things I don't like about this movie.
This movie's got a very just like non-traditional score. It's very weird. I got the soundtrack of this movie so I could listen to it while reading like horror things, and then slowly realized that I couldn't do that because a lot of it's not that kind of music.
Look at the moody lighting in this scene. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's great. This looks like it could also just be something out of like a Scorsese like crime movie too.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my big takeaways with this was, and I have this every time somebody requests for us, Austin, like a thriller or a character drama from the 70s. I just want to do a deep dive into 70s stuff.
The 70s was the decade, man.
Like, you know, I've seen The Conversation now. I've seen what is it, The Network, or no, what is that movie called?
The Network,
or is it just Network? I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
It's a movie about a man who threatens. It's a news anchor who threatens suicide on national television. You ever seen that?
Oh no, that sounds interesting though. I'll have to look
Actually,
it up.
that wasn't even for request. I think I just found that and watched it. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I've ever talked about that on the channel. It's a thing. Connor and I have talked about it because he messaged me one day about it. He's like, "You ever seen this movie?" And I said no, and then I thought about it for 10 minutes, and I went, "Wait a minute, I have seen that movie." And I'd seen it somewhat recently.
Oh, that's funny.
Austin, would you go ahead and read the couple of super chats that we got so we don't get too far away from them?
Yep. So we got a $5 super chat from Teddy. He says, in quotes, "We don't need all that Iraq stuff." Okay, Cap, no need to get political.
That's not what I said. That is not what I said.
It was a sarcastic thing. Like, he put the sarcasm.
Oh, I see.
He's making fun of you.
That's not what I said.
And then Dan Schneider, $2. Fun fact, this movie caused a miscarriage. No joke. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that went wrong on the production of this movie, and like people around it that died. The actor that plays Burke died.
The actor that plays the first casualty of the devil that jumps out the window died shortly after they shot that scene.
Yeah, it's the Burke character. Yeah.
Oh, is that his name?
Yeah.
I thought it was even somebody else. And then like crew members died during the production.
Mm-hmm. Which is something it has in common with Poltergeist, because Poltergeist also has that kind of cursed reputation.
I didn't realize it also had that.
Yeah, no, it does. And and there's people that died like around that movie. I don't know if during the production, but there's a whole thing with that. Yeah, because the claim with that is that it's because they use real bodies in the pool scene. that it cursed them.
Oh my goodness.
But anyways, no, there's a lot of injuries and stuff on this movie, which we will get to because there's like direct shots in this movie that are those injuries.
I was gonna say, I heard that principal actors got hurt and they kept it in the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's absolutely
God, that's nuts. That's not typical, right? Like, it happens occasionally, but I don't think it's typical. I think isn't it kind of taboo to use shots like that? Like, sometimes it'll happen with stunt people, and if the stunt person survived, they'll like insist or like really hope that you keep it in because they hurt themselves to get that shot. But I don't think we do it with actors where you see their faces very often.
Yeah, I don't know. This is just in that period of I think it's called like New Hollywood or whatever, where you're getting a lot more just kind of like crazy things happening in terms of trying to make a movie, and we're starting to see more of that.
Oh, I was right. It is Network.
Oh, okay, cool. I'll have to check that out.
Everybody watch Network.
And then William Friedkin himself is just a crazy person.
Yeah, didn't I read that he would like go around and shoot guns on set just to keep people on edge? Yeah. Yep. Did you tell me that, or did I read that somewhere?
No, I told you that. And apparently Max von Sydow like walked onto set one day and was like, "Okay, where's the guns?" To one of the crew members, and they're like, "Hey, over there."
Wow, that's nuts. Okay, so now that I'm looking at this at a second time, some details are jumping out at me that didn't before, because I'm wondering about like foreshadowing and setting up stuff. And God, this movie looks amazing.
Oh, it's a beautiful movie, absolutely.
I just can't get my mind around how real it feels and how like documentary-esque it is, but at the same time, it's. Like, I said this earlier, but like it's really artistic. Like it feels like a movie and it doesn't feel like a movie. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense at all.
No, and there's stuff that feels straight out of like Rocky to me, like in terms of the period, like especially with Karras.
And not just because he boxes, but
no, but like there's just like shots and stuff from like even earlier in that last scene where he walks into his apartment, it feels like a scene that could be in a Rocky movie, in the first Rocky, specifically.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you questions that I'm sure people have figured out or decided on. There's a consensus for 50 years because I'm late to the party on this by a long time. But like this movie's been here my whole life. It's only 11 years older than I am. I could have watched it. I never did. And I picked the exact wrong time, by the way, to finally watch this. I want to mention this real quick too, because I should have seen this before I had children. Because it affected me very deeply. As I mentioned in the earlier stream, as a father. Mm-hmm. Although I don't know, in some ways maybe it's better that I didn't, just because I probably appreciate it more. Like putting myself in the mother's shoes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody in this that you're supposed to care about, that's supposed to be sympathetic, really is. They all feel like real people. It's maybe impressive, especially at this time, that our main character in The Mother is because I see it as kind of her movie.
It absolutely is. So I think it's her movie, and then to a lesser degree Karras' movie, because it is kind of a double protagonist thing. But I would say more so her movie.
Which is interesting because The Exorcist is probably actually the older guy. Mm-hmm. is really von Sydow, but it's not his movie. He kind of makes the thing happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. No, he's just kind of the expert that comes in to help. But it's not really about him.
And I mean, and I care about him too, and I feel bad about what happens to him. Mm-hmm. But he feels like kind of the superhero who loses.
Oh, yeah.
If that makes any sense, it's kind of like turning that whole thing on its head, where it's like he's the or if you like, he's the classic like knight in shining armor that comes in, but he actually gets killed. He doesn't make it. It's a tragedy.
He's like Van Helsing if he doesn't help save the day.
But but then the positive thing at the end, the hope at the end is, but like, the two people that come in and sacrifice themselves didn't do it in vain, and are, the victims not only survive, but they might even have a normal life relatively after this. which I did not expect. Which I did not expect at all.
Yeah, which is a big debate between the writer and the director, and why they have the epilogue scene put back in is that the writers always felt that the way this movie ends feels too dour, while the director thinks that you can watch the movie and understand that the theme is that good ultimately wins, and that you didn't need a scene that's more like kind of like friendly at the end.
Can I tell you what makes it not too dour?
Yeah.
And why I think this works at all, and why I think or why I think it works. Sorry, without that scene, why it's still optimistic.
Yeah.
It works for the very reason that I usually get angry with Smallville episodes. It's the fact that the little girl doesn't remember any of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That actually helps this particular piece. Because I was worried that she was going to be in therapy her whole life and she would have been better off dead. And it doesn't, I don't know what the sequels do. I don't care. Maybe at some point I'll watch those. But the way this ends, yeah, she's going to suffer some kind of trauma because of the physical injury she had and just knowing the way that the devil impacted people through her. But she has a chance at a regular life after this, and she doesn't have to remember all the awful things that her body did she couldn't control and all of that. And again, it's her mother's movie and not hers, but her mother has a chance to move past it too, because she's not going to have to, live with the little girl having nightmares about her all her life and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can actually move on.
Again, I don't care what the sequels do. I've not seen them. Maybe they don't do it that way, but that's what you're left with. That's the impression.
Yeah, because 2 is about Reagan, the daughter, but then 3 is about the cop from this movie. Like, it goes like a completely different direction.
Yeah, and I've heard from you and other people that John and I think and some other folks that 3 is the good one.
Mm-hmm. No, that movie's really good because it's not just The Exorcist again; it's its own thing. Like, it's a detective investigating a series of murders, but like the serial killer that's doing them died years ago.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. And okay. Brad Dourif is the killer, and he's so good. It's his best performance.
Oh, wow, cool. Okay, I'll have to watch that. But you could just skip past 2, right?
Yeah, 3 ignores 2.
So what I wanted to ask you a minute ago, and I shouldn't have gone off on 5 different tangents because I could have talked about it while we were looking at it. But what do you think is the point of the Ouija board? Like, did she summon the devil? Because I didn't have that thought first time around, because I hadn't gotten to that yet. But now I'm like, okay, is it just foreshadowing for the fact that we're gonna deal with like supernatural and demonic and occult stuff, or does it have something to do with why she was chosen?
So I think the idea, and I do like that it is subtle, like it leaves it up for you to decide.
It's ambiguous. Yeah,
it's ambiguous, exactly. I think the idea is supposed to be that you have to invite the demon in, and using that is how she got into contact with it, and that's kind of how it wiggles its way into her. Is always how I've seen it.
Okay. So you don't think she's picked for any special purpose?
No, I don't think so.
I think there's a lot of metaphors that you can easily read into this movie, but I don't think it's a real social commentary sort of movie, if that makes any sense. And there is a difference, right? Where you can have, this isn't a morality play, but like I said, it can be a metaphor for where the filmmakers feel like we are in society with decadence and war and this and like social upheaval or fear that we're not going in the right direction. Just the fact that the devil decides to possess somebody in 1973. Why is he doing it now? Anybody going to a theater looking at this at that time is probably asking themselves that question. Like why is it happening right now? But I do wonder if you can read maybe a little subtle social commentary into the Hollywood nature of it. The question of why is the devil coming to a little girl of an actress, and a very famous actress, and a very wealthy actress. And I was going to say earlier, it is really impressive and somewhat surprising. Maybe flips the script a little bit that in 1973, after the hippie movement and everything, that we've got that we've got a woman who is very wealthy and all on her own and is made super sympathetic, and she doesn't really do anything wrong the whole movie. You know what I mean? Like, she's really likable, and the movie is not down on her because she's rich.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, and she's because you have the director character with Burke, who's like really out there and eccentric, while she's more down to earth.
That's just a choice that I was surprised by, and I'm trying to decide if it means anything, and if so, what it means, right?
Yeah. No, I think there's tons of stuff, like metaphor stuff like that you can read into it. Like, I think you can read the entire possession thing as a metaphor for sexual abuse.
People are talking about that in the comments right now.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, that's why you have, Reagan acting out in that kind of sexual way. And you get like a lot of perversion and that kind of vulgarity in how she speaks and the things she does.
Well, if any of that's intentional, I like that it's a metaphor and not like a thinly veiled one, right? Like we always talk about how the X-Men is a metaphor for racism, but like in the context of those stories, it's also people being racist against the it's not a metaphor in the sense that it is just straight up the thing we're talking about. The only thing metaphorical about it is that it's not skin color, it's superpowers, right? But like, if what is happening to Reagan is a metaphor for sexual abuse, or it's a metaphor for, as some people have postulated, apparently, anything, and I didn't get this from it. Maybe you had to be there, when this came out, but like as any of the social upheaval happening around Vietnam and all of that. Well, Reagan herself, like, she's 12. So like she's not even gone through puberty yet, and she doesn't have anybody in her life who is sexually abusing her. So that it is a straight up metaphor and not a thinly veiled thing where that is happening to her as a character, right? Same thing with Vietnam. That character doesn't care about Vietnam. Right?
Yeah.
So like it's an actual metaphor, if that's even there, and you can read into that. None of these are my ideas, by the way, so I didn't have that with it. It wasn't I didn't read metaphor into any of this on a first viewing because I was wrapped up in the literal story.
Yeah.
And for me, absolutely. It was and it was still, about things, of course, but it wasn't social commentary any more than like not about the big social things happening in the world, but just like basic universal human issues.
Yeah, like I feel like most of the social commentary you can read into it is how we handle like mental illness in terms of like treatment and stuff like that.
Yes,
all
of
the
course.
Hospital stuff and how they kind of run around in circles, kind of not sure what to do with any of it.
Okay, now that you say that, I was thinking about that, of course, yeah.
Well, and I think that's one of the best parts about it. Like, that's one of the things that makes this movie scary, is that it's not just like, oh, my daughter's possessed. It's so just raw. Like,
boy, 70s movies love their boxing, don't they?
Yeah. No, and Karras, like, it kind of has like a Rocky look to him.
No, raw is exactly right.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And I found myself thinking of other movies and TV shows that I would classify that way, and wondering how much they were looking at this, or if you would even get them the way they are without it, even if they weren't, directly inspired by them. Like, I was thinking about the X-Files a little bit watching this movie.
Oh, yeah, the X-Files definitely loves this movie. And that's the reason why I loved that Hulk episode we did, where it was like the reverse of this, where it was an adult woman speaking with a little girl's voice.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that was looking at this really hard. It's just a very influential movie.
With X-Files, not just the supernatural stuff, but just how, like relatively, especially the first couple seasons, like how like relatively real it feels. Where like it's raw. It's got it lets the camera get real grainy.
Mm-hmm. No, that it definitely does. It's got that really great 70s grain to it.
It just kind of feels like you planted a TV that you planted a camera just like right there in the action.
Yeah. Well, I guess
it doesn't feel too produced, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I guess while we're here, I should mention that one of our main leads isn't even an actor with Father Karras, Jason Miller. Like, that was just a guy.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and Linda Blair wasn't an actress before this movie either, and she's really good.
Yeah, everybody's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So, like, he's kind of capturing some of that documentary, filmmaking that he was doing before this.
Yeah, it seems like a master at grit to me, because we talk about grit a lot. Mm-hmm. And like when good, dark, gritty stuff happens, still sometimes pieces will feel kind of produced with that, where they have to manufacture it in some way. Mm-hmm. Just very little of anything in this movie feels manufactured to me.
Yeah, well, especially now. But like, I feel like that's one of the things that like the 70s really captured, man. Like, you watch something like, say, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and that movie's so dirty and gross looking, and like it's such a unique feel. Like, I've never seen a movie that captures that.
Yeah, that I've never seen.
Mm-hmm. Like it's just.
I'm sure there's the 2 or 3 famous scenes in that where I'll watch that and be like, oh, that's what everything was referencing. Because I had that a lot with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So before we get too far in, because we're about to get the initial possession, and I haven't said the big thing I wanted to say about Reagan yet.
Yeah.
I messaged Austin while I was watching this and said I suddenly had this flash. I hadn't had this yet. I've got 2-year-old twins, and they're adorable, and they don't look anything alike at all. So maybe it's for the best that I don't have identical twins after watching this movie, because Reagan reminds me in the face a lot of my daughter Selena, and I was getting this flash of like, oh, maybe Selena will kind of look like this when she's 10 or 12. And
yeah, Kat messages me that. I'm like, you are in for a rough viewing.
That's what he said. I probably thought of it just before she walks in and urinates on the floor, too.
Oh, no. See, when you said it to me, I assumed it was like in the basement scene when they're playing with the...
No, I'm kidding. It was a little earlier.
Oh, okay.
It was a little bit earlier.
I mean, I wish it was this scene. This is like my daughter.
Oh. No, and then it just hurt my feelings all through the rest of it because of that. But that is such a testament to the storytelling in this movie, and that it lets itself breathe. And it's a movie. This is based on a novel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, it feels as much like a novel brought to screen as it possibly can be, where it's using the visual medium, obviously, for all the reasons we've been talking about, to its fullest extent. But it doesn't lose the narrative through it. Not just in that it feels real, but in that the characters are written very layered, and they feel like real people. And I said the mother doesn't really make any big mistakes through the movie. She doesn't have to be made into a bad person at all. But like, she's not perfect or anything.
She's just like a regular parent.
Yeah, I mean,
like, everyone makes mistakes. And
outside of the devil, she probably has the most F-bombs in the film.
Yeah, and
if you think about it.
They're so earned, like, especially by the end. I love the scene with her and Father Karras when she's like, these people sent me there, and you're just gonna send me right back. That's such just a powerful moment from her.
Before you get to this scene, well, I was gonna say I appreciate that we get to, I said it's nice that the movie breathes, but I appreciate that we get to spend a good amount of time with the little girl before she gets possessed.
Mm-hmm.
These days, you do one of a couple things. You'd either make her insufferable and then glad that she got possessed, or you'd have her possessed after a scene or two where you're like, oh, look how cute this little girl is. You really like her, right? Now for the rest of the movie, you're going to have to watch her be evil and horrible and, say, every word you can't say on TV. And
I feel like another thing we do, too, is it'll be like, going to the person, they'll be like, oh, there's this cute little girl, and then you get there, and it's like demon face.
Yeah.
And
you get a clear dynamic between, for that relationship with the daughter and her little girl.
Yeah, like I like because you just had the scene with the bed shaking, and like several scenes ago you have a scene where the mom wakes up and Reagan's in the bed, and she's like, "What are you doing in my bed?" And Reagan's like, "My bed was shaking, so I came in here." Like,
yeah,
it's so tight.
And then you see what that actually looked like.
Yeah, and you're like, "Holy crap!"
You really undersold what was happening there. Well, that's the other thing I was going to say about that is up to that point, you're really, and maybe even after that a little bit, you're kind of questioning, on first viewing. I mean, like, that there's going to be an actual demon if you know about how this movie has gotten into the culture and everything. But all things being equal, when you first see this in 1973 in the theater, I think the movie is trying to make you wonder if there even is a supernatural component. Because it makes a really good argument for what could cause someone to think that a person is demonically possessed and what it actually is psychologically. But it's also giving you these subtle and then eventually not so subtle hints at clear supernatural stuff that can't be explained any other way. And so with the bed shaking, it's like, okay, I don't really see how you're going to explain that. But there's still in the back of my mind, I'm wondering a little bit, like, is it possible that it's not really a demon and that something else is at play here?
Yeah. No, obviously stuff like that's a little harder, but I think it still all plays. And obviously, like with that, tensions are high. It's especially this movie plays a lot with like perception of things, especially when you get to the climax.
Yeah, well, and it's what makes the priest so relatable. Our main guy before Von Sydow comes back, where he, like I said earlier, he is, I think in the stream before we shut down, where he is questioning his faith and is the skeptic. Like, he's the guy that's going to have to make the exorcism happen in the first place. He's going to have to go to Rome and get permission to even do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
no, but he is our Scully in the first place.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's just like basic storytelling, right? Like that I feel like we lose whenever we try to rip this movie off, which is that he has this whole thing with his mom that he failed her and she died, and now he has the chance to like redeem himself for that. Like it's all connected in the story.
Well, and you gotta appreciate the juxtaposition with those two relationships, where you have the mother who's trying to figure out how to help her child, worried that she's going to lose her, and it would almost be worse if she went to a mental institution even than if this killed her, right? And then the son who has lost his mother, so like we flip it.
Yeah, you see both sides of like the relationship and
they're both strong, healthy relationships that are ruined by something that is nobody's fault. By things outside of our control. One of them is supernatural. One is an unfortunate standard issue that we all have to deal with at some point. It's just basic mortality.
Yeah, exactly. No, I feel like that stuff it's such basic storytelling that I feel like we don't always do. Like we don't always put enough thought into it to match them up that well. Especially, like I said, in movies that rip this off.
Well, this as a horror film is doing the correct thing, equivalent to what I'm always talking about with action movies,
Mhm.
where a good action movie, you come up with a great story, and then your action set pieces are serving that story, and you have to have the spectacle in order to tell the kind of story you're telling. This doesn't feel like a horror film to me. You need the horror to tell the story they want to tell. And so then you have to classify it that way. But it feels like the classification comes after the premise. It's like not starting with theme. Now, I don't know if it did. It doesn't matter because of the very effective way the story is executed.
Yeah, no, exactly. And what was I gonna say? I had something to build off of that, and I just lost it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was like, "Uh-oh, I'm about to." This scene always skeeves me out, so I was like, "Uh-oh."
I have that too. Yeah, this is tough to watch.
It's not the needle for me. It's the blood splatter where I'm like, "Ugh."
Oh yeah, no, but I know that's coming now, so I'm like.
And it's weird because I'm not normally like that, but I think it's just because of how raw and like real it looks.
Yeah.
Where it almost breaks away from film violence to kind of hit real violence. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and it also helps that, I mean, it's it's a young girl that doesn't deserve this. It's come out of nowhere. I always say that children in stories are not inherently sympathetic. They can be just as awful as anybody else, and sometimes it's harder to make a kid sympathetic. We've been there and done that. Talked about that a lot on the channel.
Yeah.
They just spent half an hour making me care about this person.
Mm-hmm. No, and you have a good child.
And the fact that she's an innocent, vulnerable little girl that, again, I mean, nobody deserves this, but that, in a fictional movie sense, it's not a stupid character I want to see die.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel bad about this. And it's just, it's shot so viscerally that I'm also putting myself sometimes in her shoes, more often in the mother's shoes. It's harder for me thinking about the mother having to watch this than it is even putting myself in her shoes.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Like, a lot of the horrific stuff for me comes from the outside, the helplessness, that I can't do anything about it. When she starts to get, and like I said, she's not perfect. She doesn't handle this with grace and aplomb. How could she, right? Mm-hmm. So later on, when she starts screaming at the doctors to help her, where she's just absolutely desperate. She's at her wit's end. I couldn't relate more, to the character in that moment. And those are some of the more kind of horrific places for me. Again, looking at this as a horror film, they're not scary, but they bother me. Like when she one of the toughest moments in the film for me is when the mother finds out that the little girl is going to have to go through the spinal thing again.
Yeah.
God, can you even imagine? Because I'm just imagining as a dad, like getting, having that conversation with the doctor or getting that phone call or something.
Mm-hmm. So I'll respond to that quickly, but this is one of the scenes where they injured an actress, and it's in the film, is her spasming. She's like tied in and they're like whipping her around. And she got like back damage from that.
Oh my goodness, that's awful.
Yeah. But that was actually the thing that I was going to mention before I kind of forgot my thing with the whole blood thing.
Oh, good.
Which is that I think this movie earns its place as like, the scariest movie ever made, but it's not for the like, scary possessed girl stuff. It's just that it's the scariest stuff in this movie is, like you said, the mom reacting to all the hospital stuff. Like, it's because you can so easily put yourself in that position.
Yeah, it's not scary because you're going, look at these insane situations they came up with. It's not the imaginative nature of the horrific things.
It's scary in its ideas.
Yeah. It's because it feels like it's really happening.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I think that's why it's earned that place, and I think that's why a lot of people, because this famously got re-released with the director's cut, and people were laughing in the theaters, and it's, I think, because it earned that reputation, so people went like, oh, it's going to be scary things are going to jump out at me, and it's going to be like really spooky.
Oh, and so they're laughing at it because they're surprised that it's not scary, or they're like, "Oh, I'm better than this. I'm not scared of it."
It's like, oh, it's this boring movie where people are just talking. This isn't scary.
Yeah.
This is silly.
Well, have a couple of kids and get into your 30s and get back to me. I don't know. Like, it bothered me in exactly the way it's supposed to. I think if I saw this at 12, I would have been terrified of it. And I think I then needed to get all the way up to 39, and I've got 2-year-old daughters, and it kind of affects me the same way, but looking at it from another character's perspective.
Well, because when you're 12, you're scared by the like possession stuff.
Yeah.
But when you're an adult, you're scared because you're seeing everything around it, and you're like, man, like this is horrifying. Like I can't even imagine being in this woman's shoes.
Yeah, and if you don't have kids, it probably makes you question whether you ought to. Hey, Austin, would you read the couple of other super chats we have so far?
Yes.
Appreciate the support tonight, guys. Thanks a lot. And I'm glad that we're rolling and we're able to make this happen now.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it's working out again. So $5 from Teddy. I mean, it would be quite difficult to make a romantic comedy out of this premise, to be fair. Challenge accepted. So.
What was he responding to, do you think?
When you said that it kind of just has to be a horror movie by premise, but like it's more of a character drama.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean, he's kind of speaking to my point, I think.
I don't know. Ellen Burstyn is a single mom. Karras is a single guy. You can make a rom-com between the two of them where they get brought together by a possessed kid.
Okay. That immediately makes both of them less sympathetic. If there's a love story in the middle of this, they're starting to come together.
Yeah. Well, then it's like, whatever. We'll make a new kid. It doesn't really matter about that.
Could you imagine, though, if then it was as like a super tragic love story? Because then you get to the movie, he still dies.
Yeah, it would be like Titanic. It would be like, I'll never let go. You know.
I like her in sort of silhouette here.
Oh yeah, no, this is a great shot.
It's a good choice.
They do a really good job of making her look, harrowed, I guess is.
Yeah.
You know. Then we got another super chat from Fella for $4.99. He says the horror comes from exhausting all rational options and ultimately only discovering the absence of reason. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Summed it up perfectly. Yeah.
No, that's pretty profound. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the way we're handling. Again, I can't stop just saying, like, it feels real. It feels like what would really happen if we dealt with this. It tackles the criticism with supernatural stories like this head on of, if you're going to have this situation, how do you explain why it doesn't happen all the time? How do you explain how, or if it does happen all the time, why don't people know about it? Why, if this was happening, I had so much respect for this movie when I realized it was going this way. Like, halfway into the movie, I'm like, oh, good. Because the question you always have is, if this is happening to people, why don't we all believe in God and the devil? Why is there any question about whose religion is the right one, or if anything celestial is actually really there? And they address it with, and it's not a cop-out, but they address it almost in a weird way. I just had this thought, Austin, as the, thin line between magic and science, right? Where it's like, sometimes you have a situation like this, I mean, in this reality, right? Sometimes you'll have a situation like this that can be explained away by psychosis. Mm-hmm. And how could you tell the difference? Like, would you always be able to tell the difference?
Yeah, and you'd have things that kind of sneak by.
Yeah, and the sense I get is, because there's that great line, I forget if it's Karras or who has it, about how I think he mentions it to her earlier in the movie. We probably talked over it, or no, they haven't talked yet. But you get that line where he's like, well, they used to do this in the 16th century, and then we learned about psychology. Mm-hmm. And so, and at first I thought that meant demonic possessions just don't happen anymore and something in history changed. It's no, we know about mental health now, so we assume that these things can't be supernatural because we have a possible explanation. We've excised the other explanations.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I think that's what it's supposed to be, right? So maybe there are demonic possessions where they don't bring in an exorcist and they should, and they just throw them in the nut house. And the first thing they suggest is the doctors, and you're right, there is some social commentary here. If you did it now, it'd all be about prescribing medicine. In 1973, we weren't doing quite as much of that yet, as far as just throwing pills at you when you have a mental disorder. But they go, well, I guess we're just going to have to put her in a mental institution for at least 6 months and just see what happens. And she's like, no, I won't accept that. And they're like, okay, well, the best thing we can think of after that is exorcism, because there's no other possible explanation.
You've hit the limit. Like, there's nowhere else to go from here.
Yeah, now we got to Sherlock Holmes it. You know, if you excise every other possibility, I guess the least improbable must be correct. She's demonically possessed.
No, I love that it's just, well, she thinks she's possessed, so maybe if you do an exorcism, like, it'll kind of act with her psychosis.
Well, and I love that explanation too, because in this world, that also probably sometimes works. There probably are people that think they're demonically possessed and aren't, and you do an exorcism, and then in their brain there's a psychosomatic thing that happens, and they get over it because almost as if they've been hypnotized to get over it, which is funny because we're watching a hypnotism right now. But that doesn't preclude the notion of demonic possession.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Just because somebody can think they're demonically possessed and get out of it over an exorcism doesn't mean that real exorcisms don't need to be done on real demons.
No, and you also have that great line from Karras when he's like, well, she says that she's the devil, and if you know anything about, like, you know, mental health and psychiatry, you know that's the same as saying you're Napoleon.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the big thing that also makes it difficult for Karras to immediately buy into the idea that it's a real demon, besides the fact that he's already questioning his own faith. Is that because his mother is dying?
Yes, it's like I failed my mom, and, you know, like, I think part of it's like the kind of, you know, bad things happen to me, like, you know, it's hard to believe in God in that scenario.
Sure, yeah. How can I believe in God if he's allowing this to happen to my mother? Sure. But what I was going to say is, that's probably why they went for such an extreme case. Like, I never knew it was the devil. I assumed it was just a demon. Like, they went with the most possible extreme thing they could go with. And I don't know why the devil decided to pick the daughter of an actress to... It does seem a little random.
Well, I think what helps is, so in the book and what was originally supposed to be in this movie is that it just is a demon, and the movie kind of cuts that and it just plays it ambiguously. So it could just be a demon, it could be the devil, you know.
Okay, you don't think I'm supposed to take that literally?
No, I think you can. I think you can also see it as just another manipulation. I think you can read it both ways.
I think the reason that I kind of took it, because you're right. I mean, the demon is lying about everything, and why not pretend like you're the top man on campus, right?
Yeah,
nobody's going to disagree with you. There's not other demons around. You might as well say you're king of hell. I'm sorry. Where is it?
I was going to say, because the demon's supposed to be Pazuzu, but that's a silly name, so they were smart in not using that.
Oh, that's why people were saying that in the comments earlier.
Because they say it a lot in Exorcist 2, and it's one of the things that's, like, really funny is you get, like, possessed Reagan going, Pazuzu.
Less is more sometimes with lore. I hate that I turned into a Dr. Seuss book there. I didn't do that on purpose.
But that is what that statue is. That statue that we see is Pazuzu. Because that is like a real demon in, like, Catholic lore.
Sometimes, you know, you got to take these things on a case-by-case basis, because I don't want to sound contradictory when I say this, but sometimes I'll look at genre pieces, sci-fi things, fantasy horror, whatever it is, and I'll say, you were too generic, too thin on the on the lore, on the world building, right? So like Power Rangers 2017, why don't we even get the name of Zordon's race? It's ridiculous. Something like this, you don't want to get crazy with mythology. And you're also dealing with mythology that the majority of your audience is already familiar with, so you don't have to spend a lot of time introducing it. You just say, well, what is the mythology of this world? Have you read the Bible? That's what it is. And then you're done. Mm-hmm. And so I like that they're not like making up names for things or using demon names from anything else. Like they just go, it's the devil, or maybe it's I hadn't even thought about that. Maybe it's a demon claiming it's the. I think the reason I assumed it was the actual devil is because the older priest is like an arch nemesis with it. Mm-hmm. So that felt epic enough to me by the end.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, I think they were smart to cut the Pazuzu thing. Also, FG in the chat corrected me. It's a Mesopotamian lore thing, not Catholic. I don't know enough about religion.
Okay, but
there you go.
That's interesting because they're already blending religions of different cultures to get to the demon. And you told me that you had, because you haven't seen it, but you told me that you had read that the new movie does a lot of blending of different religions. So it sounds like some of that was already there.
Mm. Yeah, well, I know that they changed the demon to be like kind of in lore the enemy of Pazuzu. So a part of me is like, is this entire trilogy building up to the demon from the original and this new demon fighting? Because that sounds so awful, but it might be funny.
Blackest Lover $5 super chat says, LOL, I'm just imagining the other demons getting mad at Pazuzu pretending to be Satan and telling him to stop lying.
Yeah, after this movie, he's got to go to demon jail.
You find out that he's really just here to go retrieve his death note.
Yeah, I'll do that for the next Exorcist movie. We're running out of ideas.
Oh, Teddy went kind of to the same place. He said, okay, now I'm just imagining Pazuzu actually just being a janitor in hell and just saying he's the big boss. Do you think we do enough with this detective?
Yeah, I think so.
I was a little surprised by how minimally he was utilized, but I think it overall works out okay. Like I thought he was gonna uncover a little bit more than he does. Like I don't think he ever even realizes the supernatural nature of all of this by the end, right? Or am I forgetting something?
I'm not sure. He definitely knows that Reagan did it by the end, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure if he knows that it was a possession thing.
I kind of wondered if the point of the cop was going to ultimately be society doesn't accept that she's not responsible for this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I thought that's where it was going to all go, where you'd get to the end and she had to, like, go on trial or something.
No, he's too much of a film fan. He wasn't going to arrest her.
Yeah. His interrogation style is one of the things that makes this movie really credible.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That feels like it comes from somebody's life experience. Mm-hmm. Somebody really knows how to write real cops.
No, like I said, he's the main character of 3, and he's played by George C. Scott, and they do a really good job with that there, too.
Yeah, I want to watch that now.
But yeah, no, I think he gets enough to do in this movie. It's obviously not a giant role, but I think it works.
I latched on to him and kind of expected it to go a little bit further than it did, and like I was enjoying the the detective side of it, but then it's also important to note that that's not introduced until halfway through the movie, so you wouldn't want it to suddenly turn into a detective story.
That is true too.
It kind of feels like it's just covering its basis, where it's weird if the police don't get involved.
Mm-hmm. No, and you could have done the trial thing, like you were saying, but I also like that it's it's so small and like a let's all just agree to keep this kind of hush hush by the end, which I know the new movie ruins, but whatever.
Anthony Cabrera says that Exorcist 3 is much more my bag than the first, and that it's almost a full-on detective story. I'm excited now that you say that.
Yeah, because that's one of those movies that grew a cult following as time went on, and I've heard a lot of people say that. I think part of it is that they're just such different movies that it's easier to say like, well, this one's more my bag than the other one is. So like you're not comparing them as much.
Sure, yeah. Oh, wow. I didn't realize that we established the staircase this early.
Hmm. Yeah, and apparently these stairs were like the specific stairs that the writer had in mind when he wrote the book, and they like actually filmed there, and they are very intimidating stairs.
Right?
That
it looks
new,
like the stairs that the Joker comes down in the Joker movie.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. That new Chris Evans like rom-com movie filmed here, Cap, and it's really embarrassing because in the background there's a plaque that's like famous location of The Exorcist.
Oh no! They didn't digitally remove it or anything?
No, because I think it's probably far enough in the background, but like if you know what you're looking for, it's like, come on, guys, these are The Exorcist steps.
That's hysterical. That's really funny. But yeah, it's interesting that he's investigating a potential murder that happened there, and you're not really expecting the climax of the film to wind up there.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's cool because the house that they used for the exteriors didn't have the little side part where the window is looking at the stairs. They had to build that as an extension so that you could have, the ending of this movie happen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because then they did 2 and they had to rebuild the extension, and then they did 3 and they were like, yeah, we're going to get one shot of this house, so we're not even going to bother.
I didn't realize the sequels used any of the same locations or anything.
Yeah, I think the climax in 2 takes place in this house, and in 3 it's like we kind of talk about some of this stuff and we flash back to it. There's a really cool thing with the music there where it shows the stairs and it plays Tubular Bells, and then it gets drowned out by the theme of that movie. It's like, okay, yes, that's The Exorcist, but that's not the movie we're making.
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh, this is one of my favorite, just like subtle, scary things in this movie. So she comes down with the cross and she puts it on the table, and she has this entire conversation with the cop. And when they walk back to the front of the house, that cross is no longer on the table. And then obviously she runs upstairs, and that's where you get the famous cross scene.
Yeah, which is naturally disturbing.
Oh yeah, it's very messed up.
I don't think I realized, to be fair, just how awful it was supposed to be until I went back and looked at a synopsis later, and I was like, oh, that's what's happening? Okay. Yeesh.
Yeah, no, it's messed up. Especially when she puts her mom's face there. That scene is... It's something.
I've been delving a little bit into some true crime stuff lately, and like watching interrogations and trials and stuff, and like I said, this guy is super believable in his interrogation tactics. Like, he's a really good interrogator.
Yeah.
In like how well he disarms people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I like when he first brings up the movie thing with Karras. It's like a way to get more info out of him.
Yeah.
No, it all plays very believably.
He's good at putting people at ease, and to not, reveal his hand and make it clear what exactly he's after and where he's going with stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then he gives you the little side hit.
Make you think that he's on your side. They're like it's weird, right? Like you like both these characters, okay? You know that they're coming from a good place, each of them, or at least maybe you don't totally know what that with the cop, but you kind of guess that he's probably a good guy with his heart in the right place. But there is a tension in this scene
because you kind of like he could come down on her.
Yeah, you're kind of worried that he's going to start drawing the wrong conclusions.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I did, maybe that's an intentional tension through the movie, because I kept waiting for somebody to start blaming the mother for choices, for things that the child was doing. In some way, either like assuming that she or her husband was like an abuser, yeah, or that she's making up some of it.
Yeah, especially some of the more like out there things.
And we haven't really talked much about this, but it goes without saying that it's kind of a surprise choice this early, in 73 for this to be this independent of a woman with no husband. Like, she could still be an independent woman with this job, be a famous actress, and have a husband that she doesn't have to rely on too much. It feels like a very intentional choice to have her a single mother in this put together.
Well, I think that's just part of the horror, right? It's same with like this isn't even their house. Like they're just staying here temporarily. So things like that like really kind of distance her in a way where she doesn't have people to rely on.
Yeah, right.
That make that so much scarier.
And where you still have a lot of those assumed gender roles where in 73 in a case like this you'd expect a woman would just go running to her husband for help. Oh no, she doesn't have a husband, what's she gonna do?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is not a character that comes up enough in the no folks, we have had real good independent strong women in genre things discussion, right?
Absolutely.
Like we always go to Ripley first, but like she should be right there in that discussion.
And horror is the genre for that. Like,
yeah,
I remember, we
go to Ripley, we go to Sarah Connor. And she should be in a triad with those two characters.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I remember my sister once was like, "There's not a lot of female representation in horror," and I was like, you have not seen enough horror movies. And then I just like started showing her a bunch of classic stuff, and I'm like,
yeah,
that is like a very female driven genre.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched a lot of horror movies, you might expect that, and this does happen, of course, that your lead girl is just the victim. But more often, what happens is we kill off a whole bunch of men in her life, and she's the only one that makes it at the end. Like that's that's slasher movies.
Yeah, no, it's the victim, kind of coming into their own and learning to not be a victim.
And now it's just straight up Poltergeist.
I don't. And now it's
this is hard to look at.
Something. Oh, so this is one of the other big injury things is when Ellen Burstyn gets thrown, and she like slams down. Like they tied her up and they yanked her, and she like smashed her head off the.
Oh my god! So when she's screaming there, it's because she's really hurt. Oh, yeah. I don't want to know that. I do have that like at what twisted cost question with this movie.
Yeah,
where it's it is undeniable that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. What was that?
No, I just said like it is a question that people have to come to with this movie.
I think you have to, if you're a caring person, I think you have to ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as bad as like the way we got to like Nazi medicines and stuff. It's not that, but you gotta ask the questions with a thing like this. Like it's I think undeniable that this movie doesn't turn out as great as it is without some of the wild tactics that this director apparently used.
Mm-hmm.
But is it justified?
Yeah.
I worry about child actors in a movie like this.
Mm-hmm.
Especially 50 years ago. But
I've seen interviews with Linda Blair where she seems very uncomfortable to talk about her experiences on this movie. And you go like, yeah, they clearly, you know, she went through some stuff. Like I said, you know, she had like broke her back on that thing where they like swung her around.
Well, I think, I mean, I don't mean to be too delicate and insensitive. And I don't mean to act like because she's a girl, you gotta be, you know, even more careful about it. Like women can't handle these kind of things. It's a 12-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm. It's a very sensitive thing,
but like I'm not just talking about the physicality of it, just the subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would be worried about a kid in a setting like that having to say some of the things she says. And in other horror movies, I've heard people talk, you know, in featurettes and stuff about how like, you know, careful they are with the kid performer, that like nobody on set is using profanity except for in the scene, and they're like real conscious of the kid's mental well-being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. No, I mean, it's obviously something that I've had to think about a lot, and that I think this movie's a masterpiece, but that doesn't mean I condone everything that helped get it there, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm not going to refuse to watch it and boycott it because of that, but I think we got to learn from history. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, figure out ways to make as close to a great movie as you can like this, but be more respectful to the people involved and remember that they're always people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I don't think, I mean, I think there's some stories here and there about, like, the way Hitchcock would treat actors. He never went anywhere near what this movie does.
Yeah, no, and you know, you get stories with like Kubrick and stuff. Like, it's very much in that kind of new Hollywood period that all comes crashing down when you get the what's the big famous '60s Rod Serling show? What's that called?
Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone. You get the Twilight Zone movie. And you have John Landis with the whole helicopter incident where you got 3 people killed.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, it's very much in that time.
Phyllis says, I guess it depends as long as everyone's consenting. I'm not bothered by what's depicted in a film. But what I'm talking about isn't what's chosen to
how they were treating people.
Yeah, what's chosen to be shown in the movie. I guess I spoke to that a little bit with like what we're having a kid say and all of that. I mean, like, you know, your parents have to sign off on it. I think the way you approach it with the kid is really important because there's potential for, you know, for trauma. But there was definitely stuff that happened with this movie that actors did not sign up for.
No, I think that's just like, even just outside of this film, like just this period, like there was just a lot more, you know, doing dangerous things to make your movie better. And we moved away from that and got more safe. And you can maybe argue that films maybe aren't as good as some of this stuff is. But it's like a balance. It's where you're going to come down on that.
Oh, look, Connor's here, who's far more qualified to be in this commentary than I am. Hi, Connor. He says, Friedkin's previous film, The French Connection, I didn't realize that's who made that, is one of my favorites, won Best Picture. It has one of the greatest car chases ever, but the means to bring it to life made me uneasy. No permits.
They just filmed it.
Put civilians who had no idea a movie was being shot in danger. Like, that's not okay.
Mm-hmm. No, like I said, Friedkin's crazy. And he's also made some of the best movies ever made. Like, you know, it's.
I think you can appreciate the work, but I think it isn't. I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think it's important to temper it with some sobriety and say some of this was not okay.
Yeah, I mean,
and I'm glad we have the piece. Maybe the best thing you can do. I mean, at least something wonderful came out of it. I think the best thing you can do is watch it, talk about it, and say, let's not do that again. You know what I mean? We gotta learn the positive and negative, you know, consequences from these kinds of things, I should say.
No, absolutely. No, he's a crazy guy. I also recommend everybody going and listening to interviews with him because he's also very funny when he talks about stuff.
It's too bad he almost certainly doesn't have a commentary on this film, right?
Oh no, he does.
Oh really?
He and Blatty, I think, have a commentary, and the two of them, whenever they're in a room together, bicker like a married couple.
That's amazing.
I think the
well, yeah, didn't they fight about everything with this movie?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of bickering between the two of them on everything. But they were friends. It was just, that kind of relationship.
So just the green sludge coming out of her mouth is a thing that gets parodied all over the place after this.
Oh yeah, that
was one of those things I did not realize came from this movie for the longest time.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like whenever this movie comes up, people mention the split pea soup.
Fella says art is messy and the process is oftentimes uncomfortable. I don't want the work to become this overly editorialized machine. Oh, me neither, but there's a healthy middle. And like I said, there are cases where maybe it's difficult to say where to draw the line, absolutely. But like doing a car chase without permits, that's going too far.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it is something that everybody has to come to their own place with it. But it is an important thing to discuss.
I think he's absolutely right that like consenting actors who've chosen to work on a piece are not going to always be comfortable making a thing. That is absolutely true. Where it gets a lot stickier is how we should handle children in those kinds of projects.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you with the consent thing, because I mentioned that shot with her when she gets yanked back. So they did like the first take of it, and she was like, "Hey, you guys pulled me way too hard. Can you kind of ease back on it?" And Friedkin was like, "Well, we want it to be realistic." And she was like, "I get it, but you're gonna hurt me here." So he was like, "Okay, we'll ease back on you." And then he told the people that were yanking her to do it way harder.
You see, that's not okay.
Yeah,
it's not okay.
It's.
Unless this is going to sound awful, but unless she signed a thing that said, I am a prop for the duration of this movie, that's not okay. So tell me if you agree with this. And this might sound like an awful thing to say also, but do you think that with makeup, maybe even just the way she's carrying herself, that once Reagan is possessed and it's increasingly looking like there might not be anything we can do about it, she is being made to look, kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, like less attractive than she was earlier in the movie, where like she's so distraught, she's just not even as pretty as she used to be. I think that's an intentional choice.
Oh, I think it is too. Like I said, I think they do a really good job of making her up to look like she's been through hell.
Like she looks like a movie star at the beginning. And she doesn't now.
No, at a certain point, she's got like bags under her eyes the whole movie. She's got, she's all bruised.
Did you say she's one of the actors that wasn't an actor before this?
No, she was an actress.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that would have been crazy because she's playing a movie star.
No, it's him, Father Karras. It's Linda Blair, Reagan, and it's the other priest, Father Dyer, that kind of pops in and out, and it's the guy at the end.
Robert says, yeah, she looks like she's aged 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is
good. It's not just subtle... me. That seems intentional.
This is one of the other subtle creepy moments, is that she's tied up in bed, and then we get that shot of the cop Kinderman looking up at the window, and her silhouette's walking by the window. There's so many just good little things in this.
Yeah. There's something really unnerving about the way we're handling communion here. And again, I've seen this movie one time, so I can't quite put my finger on it. But it's just his performance, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's the fact, like, I think for his character, this is kind of an important moment.
Partly, yeah, it's something that he's, not fully comfortable with anymore, but he's trying to do that for these people.
Yeah.
And you can see that in his face, where he's like, I don't even know if I believe in any of this anymore. While simultaneously, he's going up against the best proof he'll ever have that it's all true.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's just something like visceral and again unnerving about his talking about the traditional mystery of communion with the body and the blood, and body and blood is all we're dealing with this horrific monster that has taken over her body, right? Like that's an intentional juxtaposition, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're getting the communion with the blood and body of Christ, just a few scenes after the cross scene.
Sorry, would you read the other super chat we have?
Yeah, $2 from Chewbacca's lover. William Friedkin and Jared Leto would be best buds.
I guess I could see the idea that his method is not that far away from method acting. I guess that's kind of the point he's making.
Yeah, it's kind of method directing.
Method directing, yeah. Well, like, you're trying to make it so real that you don't care what kind of plight you're putting anybody else under.
But also, William Friedkin would punch Jared Leto. Straight up.
Well, that's the thing, is I don't think he can deal with method actors.
Yeah, I don't know. It would certainly be a real matchup.
Yeah, because the problem with a method actor, with a guy like that, is he is, at least what it sounds like to me, because I haven't looked into all of this until the 5 minutes of cursory research I had time to do before this commentary. It sounds like he's the kind of guy that really treats his actors like props, and he's got... You can tell by the quality of the filmmaking, he knows exactly what every frame of this is supposed to look like. It all looks... It's weird, because I said earlier, it feels real. It feels like it's all really happening. But I can also see a clear plan in it.
But I wonder what he would be like with method actors too, because he works with a lot of non-actors.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's a good call.
Does a lot of the stuff to get those big performances out of them. It's like,
but I guess what I'm saying is a method actor might have too much of his own vision. And this guy has a vision.
Yeah.
So that's where I would think they'd clash and they'd be at loggerheads.
Yeah, I can see that. Connor says he wonders if Karras and Rocky know each other. I mentioned that earlier. Yeah. He always reminds me of Rocky.
Yeah, and the 70s loves boxing.
Yeah, no, exactly. He's just got that look, that kind of harrowed look.
This is an interesting comment. He says, some people think it would be scarier with her regular voice. He's talking about her being possessed. But the voice they went with always makes me so uncomfortable. I don't believe in evil, but it's what I imagine the voice of it is. Absolutely. That's one of the things that makes the thing feel so realistic is... I just buy the demon. I just buy everything about it. I like the multiple voices. There's no questioning at a certain point that this little girl, no matter how disturbed she might be if this was actually a mental condition, could possibly make those sounds come out of her voice, much less, speak in tongues and the different languages and such. I like that we ramp up to the tongues thing too, that at first there's evidence that everything she's saying could be something the girl knows.
Yeah.
Like, oh, she's speaking English, she's just speaking it backwards. I mean, it's amazing if she could do that, but sure, it could be a psychosis, whatever. But then eventually, she, clearly knows things that she shouldn't. I guess that's the same scene, and he hasn't revealed that to the mother yet. But then he'll start speaking as his mother, with her voice clearly, and speaking Greek.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, I think the voice is absolutely part of what makes all of that creepy. I can't remember that actress's name, but she does a really good job with that. And
no, it's
not. Like I said earlier today, I saw clips of the on-set audio, and it's it is really funny. I don't think it would have worked with Linda Blair's voice.
I think the brand of language, the kind of profanity, just how twisted all of that comes across. Again, especially 50 years ago. But we should mention, of course, it is the 50th anniversary. Is that part of why you wanted to do this?
No, it's just that you've never seen this. It just happened to be the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, it's cool that it worked out that way.
And William Friedkin just died like a month or two ago, I think.
Oh, I didn't know that. And I mean, I don't mean to vilify the guy, but because I didn't know anything about him until today. But just some of the methods are real questionable. It seems to me.
No, like I said, I don't think it's, speaking ill of the dead to say that he did some crazy stuff when making movies. I also think he made really great movies. It's like we keep saying, everyone's got to kind of find their place with that.
But just to finish the point I started making a minute ago, I think that brand of language is really important in making the devil, to the fellow's point, of making the devil feel like, absolute evil incarnate. Like, anybody that would look at this and go, I don't want to watch a movie where somebody talks like that, what do you expect? If the devil existed, what would you expect it to sound like? What would it say? How would it talk? Like this. I don't know how you could argue with that. Like, that's what it would be like.
Well,
and they're really biblical about it too, where it's like, he tempts you, he lies to you, and it's impressive that they're able to make that whole thing work, where he can still get under people's skin and make them question themselves and not believe in themselves anymore, while simultaneously, like, while leading with the most horrific things you've maybe ever heard in your life.
Yeah. No, and all of the horror out of that is your perversion of innocence, which is all really effective.
Well, that's why it's got to be a little girl, and of course that starts. Probably not the first thing to do it, but it's a big part of the precedent of little girls have to be scary in a lot of horror films. But I guess it's just right for this material. It makes a lot of sense that stuff would become real. What's the word I'm looking for? I'll think of it. We just got a couple more super chats. Would you go ahead and start reading those?
Yeah, so Teddy says, William Friedkin is an unstoppable force and method actors are immovable objects. They are going to do this forever.
That's hilarious. No, I was going to say, it makes sense that some of this kind of stuff would become archetypal in a smarter, more sophisticated piece that then gets ripped off and dumbed down over and over again. Right? Yeah. Like, the history of horror movies makes so much more sense to me now that I finally watched this movie. Like, a lot of that stuff comes from things that are more deliberately trying to scare you and freak you out by using things that I just thought of this. Superficially, that did that before in a movie that scared you because you cared about the people involved and you could relate to it and you could put yourself there. And then they take the superficial things that worked with that and think that those things all by themselves will freak you out. Yeah, and that's not to say that we've never had another good sophisticated horror film after this.
Yeah,
but I'm sorry, say that again.
Said, a lot of stuff that knocks this off just thinks it's the thing that's scary about this movie is kids saying vulgar things.
Yeah, and look, somebody's head's turning all the way around.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, that's real disturbing. But the reason it's there is not just because, even if this is part of it, it will bother you. In 1973, you've never seen that. It's because at that point, it's time to really prove that this is definitely happening and it's not a psychosis. There's no way around it at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And then Dan Schneider gives $2 and says, you guys should review Cruising next.
What is that?
I'm not sure. Is that another Friedkin movie, maybe? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
I feel like I have heard of Cruising, but it's not coming to me right away.
Bob the Hun has an interesting point with his $5 super chat here. And again, thanks a lot, man.
Oh, this is the big famous shot.
Super creepy contact lenses.
Yeah.
Some of the best contact lenses from this period. Oh, and sorry, I'll read this in a second. It also goes without saying, every at least 70s and 80s Stephen King movie is looking almost exclusively at this film.
Yeah, definitely. And that is maybe the big
hyperbolic
shot where Marin walks in is maybe the most parodied thing in this movie.
I was talking over it. What shot was it?
It's the shot where it's like him from behind in the smoky area where he's walking up to the house. It's also what the poster is.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Bob the Hun, would the devil use modern profanity? Satan isn't very timeless in his language. Blasphemy makes sense, but would he use our favorite curse words? What I would suggest to you, and this is just my own personal take on it, if you believe in Jesus Christ and he comes back tomorrow, is he going to talk like he did in Roman times?
Well, it's like they say in this movie, like everything that Reagan, possessed Reagan will say is meant to like mess with your mind. So
yeah, so like
going to that place is part of that.
Yeah, but like 2 points with this. To what you're saying, you speak in the tongue that the people you're trying to intimidate speak, so they know what you're talking about and you can get under their skin more, right? But also, just because you're ancient doesn't mean you haven't continued living, right? Or existing, or however you want to put it for entities like this. God, Jesus, the devil, they all spoke in the same tongue as everybody else that was around in biblical times. Right? So why wouldn't they still be speaking that way when they deal with whoever they're dealing with now, if they were to continue to interact with us?
Yeah, absolutely.
The devil's got all these souls that keep showing up back in hell. If he's there, he's hearing how modern people talk. If he keeps possessing people on Earth, he's hearing how modern people talk.
Yeah, just by having a presence in modern day, they get some of that. Absolutely.
Teddy, it's meant to mess with your mind. That's basically my point. The demon is using language it knows would get under people's skin the most. Yeah, and that's why it was effective in pissing people off in 1973. We don't want to hear this kind of language in movies. Yep, the devil knows that. He's also getting under your skin. In a movie about a woman trying to make a film that has a scene that has something to do with college and maybe censorship. There's something going on there. It's a little meta, potentially. I don't know. Not sure.
So this is one of the other crazy things is the set they like set up with a bunch of like air conditioners and kept it like a fridge. William Friedkin in the interview I saw said that the set was -30, and I don't know if he means Fahrenheit or Celsius. I assume Celsius at that point, but that's crazy.
Yeah, that's nuts. Yeah, the only thing I read about that was that everybody was uncomfortable because they were always either in a desert climate or a frigid climate. But yeah. I don't know why, watching the scene, I guess I was just wrapped up in the fiction because I wasn't even wondering how they were doing this or thinking about the fact that obviously it must be cold. Like, it's just at this point, I'm buying all the supernatural stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, like, all the air coming out of people's mouths, it didn't look cold to me. It just looked like she's making all this, or the devil's making all this crazy stuff happen.
Well, yeah, it just kind of fits into everything that's happening. It's all a piece. And we're about to get the shot that I'm sure you went, oh, it's Ghostbusters.
No, but good call. Like, Yeah, of course, that's where that came from.
Oh, okay. I figured when that would happen, you'd immediately be like, "Oh, Ghostbusters." There we go.
I think I knew again by osmosis that that's where that came from, probably.
Yeah.
So it's more like I see that scene and I'm like, oh, they're doing Exorcist, but
yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Again, there were definitely a couple things watching this movie finally that I did not realize came from this. I was impressed by how long this scene goes, and it doesn't lose me. I'm not wanting a reprieve, either because it gets boring or because it's too intense. Like, it is intense, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I think it effectively keeps building too.
Yeah, I was just really impressed with every piece of it. I mean, there's a lot of practical effects and stuff we're dealing with here.
Oh yeah.
And I'm just wrapped up in these characters. I'm feeling really bad for both of these priests. I'm trying to deal with all of this. I think
it's interesting that we lose...
Puts you right in that moment.
That we lose the mom in all of this, but like it still works because like we're so also with Karis. Like I said, it's almost a double protagonist movie, but it's definitely more of her movie.
Yeah, by the end of the movie, it feels more like it's been hers all along just because Karis dies at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, you can kill off a protagonist at the end of a story. Like, that doesn't mean it's necessarily not dual protagonist, but the fact that it is dual and you lose one makes it feel more like hers all along.
Yeah, I can see that.
Dan Schneider, $5 super chat. Thanks, man. He says, Cruising is a William Friedkin film. Don't look up the plot. Going cold. Speaking of cold, and knowing nothing about it, it will blow your mind. Bet you my life.
Okay, cool.
I will take you up on that. Yep, I will check that out. There's also some kind of like heroic 101 stuff happening here as far as like making us really root for the heroes in a scene. Putting this in that kind of terminology because I think it does fit where these guys weirdly are kind of like underdogs at this point. I mean, they're the only people that have a chance at this, but there's hardly any exorcists. Nobody really knows how to do this.
No, they got to make the best out of it. Father Marin is the expert in that he's done one and it lasted months.
Yeah. So he doesn't really know if this is going to work out. He's flying by the seat of his pants. He's guessing.
Yeah. No, and like we're not far into doing this, and the demon's already getting to Father Karras's head.
And obviously, Power of Christ compels you is another big thing that everything does after this.
Mm-hmm.
Including
I did this in high school once.
Ghostbusters 2016.
Oh, of course that does that.
That was in the marketing.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, the whole Power Patty compels you thing.
Oh no, of course.
Yeah, no, you know about this.
Of course. I blocked it out of my mind like Reagan at the end.
You know what the weirdest thing about that scene is?
What's that?
Well, on video, they occasionally, I guess for some reason it's supposed to enhance the experience and make it cooler. They occasionally have things from the frame
where it goes
drop
out
off into the black.
Yeah.
And in that scene, her necklace, her bling is doing it.
Yeah, no, that was the thing.
The Patty necklace, it's just like getting off the frame into the black. It's weird.
Yeah, that was the thing I noticed from the Plinkett review, and I was like, this is bothering the hell out of me. I hate how that looks. And that's got CGI vomit instead of just throwing up soup.
That's true.
And thankfully, Father Karras wasn't like, it got everywhere, every spot, every pores.
Thomas Lowe says, too bad John Constantine hasn't been born yet. His exorcism would have been done in 5 minutes and we wouldn't have a movie then. Yeah, I had that very same thought while I was watching this. I also had this thought. It's going to be kind of unfortunate, Austin, when you and I finally get to the Constantine movie on the Rewind commentary project because I'm afraid this is gonna hurt it some. Because I like that movie okay. Finally watching this, I don't know that I'm gonna feel a little bit differently about it. I'm not sure it's not gonna be a little bit of like a Daredevil situation.
No, and I mean a Constantine movie that looks like this would be awesome.
Right? Well, and it has an exorcism at the beginning that's pretty effective, but have you seen that movie?
Once in a I think like a year ago, and I don't remember it super well, but I remember thinking it was all right.
No, that's right. I remember when you finally watched it. Actually, we didn't really have a conversation about it. You were just like, "I'm finally gonna watch this." No, maybe it was Connor that.
Connor also just watched it not that long ago.
I was thinking of Connor with that. I didn't realize that you also watched it. This is not interesting to anyone.
I did. Yeah.
Bob the Han, $5 super chat. I would love to see if you think Cruising's ending makes sense or is pretentious BS. Hope you and Austin review it. Oh, that sounds like the kind of thing that, speaking of Connor, that Connor would want me to review. Hey, speaking of that though, thank you for the super chat, and I am very curious to watch that. We'll try to check it out at some point. Let me write it down. I'm not promising a review, but I will try to watch it.
Yeah.
Austin, I have a couple of questions about stuff the demon does.
Oh, well, and I was going to ask you too if you thought the neck turn was too much, because that's a big complaint I hear people bring up.
Why is that how she survives it?
So my read on that is that it's not actually happening. I think it's the same thing as the like the statue and whatnot. I think it's in their heads.
Okay, I don't think that works.
That's fair.
Here's the reason. It's foreshadowed to, and this is actually part of my question, it's foreshadowed to by the guy that gets dropped out the window because his head is backwards. It's a little too easy, right, if that physically happens in one scene but is in somebody's head in another scene.
Well, and she's only doing it to mess with Father Karras because he knows that that's how he died. So that's always been why.
Oh, okay.
Well,
here's my question about that. Yeah. When that character goes out the window and has his head backwards, what I was wondering is, did the devil twist his head or possess him momentarily and turn his head around? Because that's where I'm not sure if you're right that it's in their heads, because I thought it was possible that it was a partial possession and that's why it happened.
I've always thought it was that Reagan like twisted his head around and then pushed him out the window, but it is vague,
which is plausible. It's very vague, yeah. Because I mean, she could have even done it. I should say the demon, but like it could have even done it telekinetically because it does move stuff around. It wouldn't even necessarily have to use the girl's arms.
No, absolutely.
Anthony, I don't mind the neck turn. I always just accepted it as something otherworldly to add what the demon can do. Yeah, like I said, if it's really happening, I just wonder how she doesn't have a severed neck and survives it. Because it's not like when the demon leaves her, all of her injuries are healed. Yeah, that's the problem with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, that is a big complaint I hear people bring up a lot.
Well, that's the other thing, and I'm glad he mentioned this because I was wondering this too, but I'd forgotten about it. Anthony Cabrera also says, well, Reagan twists her head back when her mom gets yanked back, so she's done it before. So you're saying that one is also in somebody's head?
Well, and that one's not even like a full, because there she like fully flips around, while the one with the mom, she twists it like a little bit more than what you can actually twist. Like it's not a full spin around.
Okay, look at everybody in the scene. It is definitely colder now than it was earlier in that room.
Oh yeah, no, it's freezing in there, clearly.
Because I get that there's intense stuff happening with these performances, but they look miserable the way they didn't before.
Yeah, that was the thing I saw Max von Sydow complain about. He was like, it was so cold and it's so hard to act when you're freezing.
Yeah, and it's not like they're having just a simple conversation. Like, they've got to exert some energy here.
Yep, exactly.
But yeah, just going back to something we talked about quite a while ago, I totally buy when he attacks the little girl, and that's I don't see that as Hollywooding it or whatever.
No, like it's like an emotional breakdown.
Yeah, and it took a long time before he finally got to that place. I just don't get the criticism of resorting to physical violence just to make a movie exciting. That is not what's happening there.
It's not like, he just starts beating her up and then wins. You know what I mean? Like he loses cool, beats her up, and then he makes the self-sacrifice.
Yeah. It's not a superhero fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. One thing I wanted to mention too, we just passed the stair scene with the two of them. That's a big change in the director's cut, is that there's a whole scene where they talk about kind of what it means with the devil messing with them. And I think it also just works that they're both so beat out from what they experienced, so they're not saying anything. But the scene where they talk is really good. But I think it works well here too.
I should maybe watch that cut at some point if there's worthwhile scenes in it, but I'll be surprised if I don't still prefer this cut. Yeah, sure.
Because I would say the biggest things that are really good are that the ending scene's really good, and the spider walk scene is good, but it doesn't really need to be there. And overall, I just prefer this cut.
This is sadder on a second viewing. Because we got 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
And when they go back in that room, they're both gonna die.
Yeah.
So
you don't realize that the first time
it's sadder on a second viewing.
Well, I love this scene with the mom and Karis, where she's like, is she gonna die? And he's like, no, and he realizes, he has to step in. He can't let the mom go through what he did with his own mom.
Yeah, do you think he goes back in kind of knowing he's not gonna make it?
I think to an extent. He's got like a very like knowing look when he
does
when he looks up the stairs.
It looks almost like a suicide play. Obviously, I didn't have that first time out because I didn't know what was gonna happen. I was watching a movie.
No, he looked up and he was like, "I'm gonna use my boxing skills. I'm gonna kick her ass."
The cop's face is unintentionally kind of funny.
Yeah.
When the door opens.
I mean, that actor just has like a Looney Tunes face.
I'm shocked when he first opens his mouth and he doesn't have a British accent, to be perfectly honest with you.
He looks like Inspector Clouseau. Like he should have a French accent.
Oh yeah, good call. Well, European in some ways. It's amazing that it's just an American accent. Oh, hey, I have another question about the devil.
Yeah.
The demon, whatever you want to call it. Other words that also start with a D, except for that. Just the creepy look on her face. She should have played Palpatine. Anyway.
I want that cut now.
So I'm surprised the devil takes him up on this when he's like coming to me. There are some questions about what exactly the devil's endgame is and what it's trying to do, and for some reason with the I'm focused so much on the character study, I don't really care about any of that while I'm watching it.
Yeah.
But after the fact, I'm curious. At least it doesn't really hurt the movie at all. But I don't totally know why it leaves her.
Well, I think having the kind of perversion of a priest is maybe more effective in what it's doing than like a little girl. That kind of corruption.
But why does it need permission? Why, if it wanted that, why didn't it do it earlier?
Well, I think that's just like part of the mythology. Because, like I said, I think that's how it gets into Reagan through the Ouija board.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I think that's just supposed to be.
I just watched this. I'm still feeling things out.
No, absolutely. You were asking questions about it.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm just saying for the audience, if anybody thinks I'm dense, like a movie they've been thinking about for years and decades. Okay, so I'm going to ask you this a million years ago, but
sorry. Before you do that,
yeah.
So this is another non-actor, this priest, and when he's shaking here, it's because William Friedkin slapped him across the face and then made him do the scene. So that's why he's shaking.
Good Lord.
But anyways, go on with what you were saying.
Well, I'm just going to say this. I hope none of these people were paid scale. So, good Lord. Okay, so when the devil
I keep interrupting myself, but I'm just so impressed with like lighting and camera placement and editing and everything. Oh my god.
Well, another big thing too is
I think
how
I'm
much
more
this
impressed.
Movie has no score.
Yeah,
it's really effective.
Yeah, that's part of what makes it feel like you're really there. A lot of this, and when it does have score, it's usually effective. Okay, anyway, what I was going to ask you is, we're going to read the credits before I get to this. When the priest pretends to put holy water on the little girl, and the devil thinks it's real and is freaking out about it, why does that happen? Because it's either a ruse where it's pretending or it really is affected by it. And either way, it kind of feels to me like just a plot device so that he can be wondering in the moment if it's actually real. Because he uses that as a test to see if there's any credence to it being really a demonic possession. And if she just like has a psychosis and thinks she has a demon, then that might help to prove that idea. So why does the devil go, oh no, holy water, if it's not actually holy water?
That I'm not sure. That's one of the things I've always wondered, and I don't have a read on it. I guess maybe to mess with them, but to what end? I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Okay, like I said, stuff like that's not remotely killing the movie for me. Like I'm very impressed with it. I get why it's beloved and everything. It feels like almost
it's small enough.
Feels like almost the Godfather of horror movies.
Yeah, definitely.
Would that be an overstatement? I don't think that's an overstatement.
No, I mean it had the reputation of being the greatest, or the scariest movie ever made. So,
Daddy, maybe the devil just hates water in general. The joke was on the Catholic Church for millennia. You never had to bless it. You didn't have to do anything. Can you read Teddy's other $5 super chat?
Yes. So $5. William moved the set into a freezer, forced them to act there because that's just the William method. Yep.
Well, if he's going around just slapping people
and shooting guns.
Shooting guns. Good Lord. See, I also really appreciate just how unpredictable this movie is. This isn't anything like where I thought we'd be left at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think the ending of this movie is a happy one, but it's also to a degree bittersweet because, like, obviously, like I like Karras, so it's sad that he dies, but he ultimately won in that sacrifice.
Well, I think part of the optimism is maybe in, God, I think that's kind of awkward.
That music shift?
Yeah, I love that. I thought something was wrong with it. I really did. I was like, oh, did it already jump to the next thing? Like what is happening? Like in the streaming service? But no, it's, again, especially in 1973 when you're in the middle of Vietnam and you're worried about the Cold War and all that stuff. And also, like, this probably isn't happening as they're making the movie, but you're also right in the middle of Watergate right then. You get to the end of the movie, and an institution has not failed us. You know?
Yeah.
Like, the Catholic Church won the day on that. Like, it was a couple of individuals that jumped in of their own accord and tried to help somebody they didn't know if they could help and, made the ultimate sacrifice. But, like, is that part of the optimism of it? Not that it's, like, championing the Catholic Church or anything.
Yeah, I don't see it as much as that, as much as it's just this one guy, kind of beat his demons and overcame them.
But we don't really have to deal a ton with like bureaucracy from the Vatican or any of that. Like they're not. They have a scene where they have to get permission or where he has to get permission, and they've got to decide exactly how they're gonna operate. But you don't have like 20 minutes of, oh God, the Catholic Church won't let us go through with this. What are we gonna do? Like that institution didn't fail us.
Yeah. No, they actually acted.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know how intentional that is. But I'm just saying that might be a little bit of the optimism of it.
Yeah, I know that's one of the big arguments between Blatty and Friedkin is that Blatty thinks that Karras jumping out the window can easily be read as the demon killing him, while Friedkin goes, no, it's obviously him killing the demon, or getting rid of it. And that's the side that I land on.
I saw it as completely ambiguous and hadn't really decided who is jumping out the window at that point. I really wasn't sure how to read that.
No, I mean, the kind of talks that I've seen where they bicker about it, Friedkin does say, you can read it that way, but this is how I read it. And that is where I land on it too. But
so is the optimism of that just like real basic good triumphing over evil stuff?
Yeah, exactly. And the scene where they're on the stairs, like I said, in this cut they don't say anything, but in the director's cut, they have like a whole back and forth, is kind of summarizing that idea. And Friedkin cut it because he was like, well, the movie's about that. Like, I don't need a scene where they outright say it.
Yeah.
And Blatty was like, no, you do. And that's kind of where they bickered about it.
Having not seen that, I don't feel like much is lost without it.
But it's a good scene. But
yeah.
I don't need it. And I like how powerful it is just to cut to them, and they're so kind of defeated from what they experienced that neither can say anything to each other.
It's also interesting that from his side of it, with his arc, if he's a dual protagonist, it's not really about a man getting his faith back.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's.
He doesn't really win through the power of crime. I mean, I guess he does in the sense that he's doing an exorcism and it's working. So like in that sense, but like if it's him triumphing over the demon through his sacrifice, that's not like I gave myself to God. That's I did this thing for the greater good and just to save this little girl and and also somewhat out of guilt of I wasn't there for my mother. I think.
No, I think that's exactly it. It's just that redemption of I failed to save my mom, and now I saved this girl, even though it cost me my life. I did that sacrifice for these people.
And so the optimism of that might be, you don't actually need God to do the right thing. Maybe I mean, it's hard to say. Because I think the movie is intelligently being also ambiguous about where it's coming down on religion. Like, it's not making any kind of a judgment, I don't think.
No, and I think it helps that it has, like I said, like a Catholic writer and a agnostic or atheist director.
Yeah.
So you're kind of seeing both sides, kind of balancing it out.
Dan Schneider left a $2 super chat. I don't understand this. Oh! Imagine. Okay, now I see it as a sentence. Sorry.
Wait, now you have to sing it like you're John Lennon.
I'm not gonna do that. He said we'll get copyright flag. He said, "Imagine freaking breaking Jared Leto's back."
It's easy if you try.
Does he do it like Bane?
See, my immediate reaction.
Or does he do it in a stunt that went wrong?
See. What immediately came to me is just Jared Leto standing there, and then William Friedkin walks up and slaps him on the back so hard that he breaks it. But imagining him doing like the Bane break would also be really funny.
This is a good point. Robert says when he shouts no, I think it's pretty clear it's a self-sacrifice. And also, like, why would the demon jump out the window? Because, like, where would it go after that? Back to hell, I guess. Like,
well, yeah, that's actually what happened. The demon was just trying to get away, but it tripped down the stairs and died.
Somewhat anticlimactic ending. It's a good thing it's ambiguous because that's stupid.
Yeah, Pazuzu never figured out how to get down those steps.
So I will say, and this is gonna maybe sound like an obvious dumb observation, but like the first time you watch a movie that's hitting you in a real, relatable personal place, and you don't know what's going to happen, and you're kind of terrified for the people involved. You don't know if you don't even know if it's going to be uplifting or a downer at the end. This in some ways is both, I guess. But for the things that was really resonating with me, of course, with the parent and her daughter that she couldn't help, they make it out okay at the end, and so like I'm spending the whole movie like I'm like imagining myself in her shoes and watching what she's going through, watching her deterioration, and her panic. And then you get to the end of the movie, and that part of it is, brighter and more optimistic. And so it's not going to be as hard to watch on repeat viewings. Mm-hmm. So like this is looking at this with you, obviously we're talking over it, like it wasn't. There are certain scenes, of course, that are rough and a little bit difficult to get through. But overall, as a piece, like I'm immune to it now. Last night it was difficult to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
Difficult and entertaining in a lot of places, of course, because it's just so well made. So like it was gripping. It continued to hold my attention, but there were definitely places where I don't know. I didn't have the Eraserhead thing where I kept wanting to turn it off, but there were definitely places where I was like, God, this is hard to not look away from the screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, like I said, I think it earned that reputation of the scariest movie of all time.
Absolutely. It just doesn't remain scary. Like once you know what's going to happen, I don't think it stays scary. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that make any sense at all?
I mean, I can understand that. I definitely still in the moment. I'm like, oh man.
Sure. Well, and again, we talked over the whole exorcism, and a lot of that probably still.
Well, like I said, the stuff that's the scariest to me is most of the hospital stuff. Like it's the just beating down of this woman who's trying to save her daughter.
Every time I watch this now, I'm just going to yell at the screen like, just don't play with a Ouija board.
Every time you watch it,
I think you might be conjuring the devil. Stop it.
I know you call him Captain Howdy, but that doesn't mean it's okay. Stop.
See, that's the end. It turns out Captain Howdy is just a pathetic demon in hell that wants his death note back.
Well, it turns out Captain Howdy's a pathetic demon from hell that can't even walk downstairs.
God, what a doof.
What an idiot, that Pazuzu.
Robert, I honestly find Exorcist 3 creepier and more unnerving on rewatch. I'm curious to watch that.
Exorcist 3 has the greatest jump scare of all time.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Dan Schneider, this movie got a lot of people to go to church. True story.
Not only that, but a lot of people being like, I need an exorcism because my kid's sick.
Oh, no.
It had like a lot of that.
It's like the equivalent of the kids jumping off the roof with capes thinking they're Superman.
It's the parent equivalent of that.
You'll believe a demon can get out of your child. You'll believe a demon is in your child in the first place. And that all seems, quaint and weird now. But we talked about this last week when we did the Spawn commentary, Austin. I think it's important not to underestimate how little, especially in 73, but even in the mid-90s, early 90s when Spawn came out, later 90s when that movie came out, I think it's important not to underestimate that we're all really used to living in an age where like demonic stories, demonic possession stories are kind of the norm and not taboo anymore. when I was growing up, even still in the early 90s, people like by and large, a lot of people I knew didn't want kids anywhere near any of that stuff, and it was, not unusual to have stories like that for adults, but it wasn't a family affair. You know what I mean? Like, they were still more few and far between. So, like, 1973, I don't mean to talk about it like it's the Dark Ages and like we never had a story about demons and occult stuff and all of that. But this was a lot more pronounced and explicit about it than people were used to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the documentary I watched, there's a part where it said they screened this internally in Warner Brothers, and when it ended and all the producers or whatever, the people in Warner Brothers, were just sitting there quietly, they all kind of looked at each other and went, like, we can never release this. Like,
yeah.
Like, this is unreleasable.
They got flack for letting it be R and not X.
Mm-hmm.
Because the biggest concern was that kids would go to the theater to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because like I said, that documentary I watched was a BBC one, and they mentioned that when Your Kind of Home Video came out, it was banned in Britain.
Wow.
Because they didn't want it to be like at homes where kids can watch it, which is like insane to me.
Yeah.
But...
Well, and you remember the Itchy and Scratchy movie episode of The Simpsons? Like, kids... Like it is true that kids would, go to the theater and try to see the thing they're not supposed to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all part of being a kid.
I'm sure some of that was happening. It doesn't mean the movie should have been X.
Yeah.
Certainly means that parents should do their jobs.
Mm-hmm. No, and sneaking out to movies you're not supposed to watch as a kid, I think, is all part of growing up. Like, every kid sees things that they probably shouldn't, and they're okay. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I think that's just part of the human experience.
Well, and I think, like I hesitate when you say that, because the equivalent of that now is stuff you find on the internet, and the kids are not necessarily okay after some of that, especially when there's too much of it. Like, it was just a simpler time when I was growing up, man. Like, you might sneak out and see a couple of rated R movies, but you're not going to have the constant exposure you might with the internet if your parents aren't paying attention to you. So, like, parents really need to do their job. But you're absolutely right. Like, but a little of it goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. Connor in the chat asks, what's a better jump scare, Exorcist 3 or the blood test scene in The Thing? I'm going to do you one more, Connor, and say the top 3 jump scares of all time are those two and the introduction of Leatherface and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So it's between those 3. There you go, Connor.
And I've only seen one of those 3 films, so I can't help you.
So you have the one, because that's the only one.
Well, and I've only seen that movie once, so I don't remember that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Schneider, $5 super chat. Cruising is much darker than this film. It might be too much for you, but you should still watch it. Austin will love it, though. Might make his list. I like how everybody thinks I'm very fragile and I can't watch anything. This affected me on a...
What list? My greats list or my enemies list?
This affected me on a real personal kind of level. Not like a, oh my God, there's stuff I can't watch in a scene level as much.
Mm-hmm. No, like I said to you when you texted me and you're like, oh, Reagan reminds me of my
She reminds me of my daughter.
I was like, oh man, you are in for a rough...
I had this flash where I'm like, I think Selena might look like this girl a little bit at 10 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't have thought of that. I wish I hadn't done that now.
Especially because she was throwing up today, so it's even worse.
Yeah, I meant to talk about that during the movie. So I think this movie... I'm so glad you said that, because we almost ended and I wouldn't have brought this up. I think this movie might have... I don't know yet. I've only got the one instance, but this movie might have helped cure me a little bit, Austin, of my weak stomach some. Because
interesting.
I usually have a really difficult time cleaning up vomit of any kind. And I don't mean to get gross, but
but a lot of people have.
But my daughter was throwing up tonight, and I had to deal with some of that. And sometimes I'll like retch a little bit, like not straight up throw up, but just like it's hard for me to deal with. It's gross. I don't like the smell, et cetera, et cetera. And it might not be a coincidence that I didn't go through any of that after watching this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might have something to do with it.
There you go. This movie cured you.
Isn't that crazy? Maybe crazy. Just today. Like maybe it was just because I just watched much grosser vomit. And y'all complain about vomit in things. Again, it's like the language the devil was using. It's like, yeah, it's the devil. It's gonna be like more than uncomfortable. It should be like that's what it should be like.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna tell that story.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all that stuff is supposed to make you uncomfortable. So if you're uncomfortable, the movie did its job.
It's doing its job. Yeah, it's disturbing. It needs to be disturbing. I'm on my fence. On my fence. I have a fence and I'm standing on it. I'm on the fence about trying to show this to my wife because she was curious about it, but doesn't like horror movies, and a lot of the stuff that's in this might be, I don't even want to say too much for her, but just stuff she doesn't want to have to deal with. But it's got to be there to tell that story.
Mm-hmm. There's no way around it.
And I kind of think she might appreciate that and still should see it. I don't know. Like, I was honestly surprised that I was taken in by it as much as I was. Like you get a classic film canon thing like this, and you're like, I mean, you'll probably watch it and like appreciate why it's important, but you've heard how great it is for so long that like it's up too high on a pedestal. Like I worry about that kind of thing with movies that I wait this late in my life to finally bother with. And yeah, it's immune to all that. I had just an experience with it. I was able to put all that out of my mind. Like,
no, that's awesome. No, there was like a little bit of worry for me at a moment where at a certain point today, I was like, I haven't heard from Cap about his reaction to this movie. Like, is there like a small % chance that like maybe he didn't like it? Like, I figured he would really like this, but maybe, I don't know.
No, I really liked it. It hurt my feelings. It kind of ripped my soul out and then put it back in at the end. But that's the thing is, I think it has to put my soul back in at the end. Mm-hmm. And something that I wouldn't say that about. Sometimes I would think that's a cop-out. I didn't have that with this. It helps that it still has that massive tragic element.
Yeah, it's not...
Everybody can't get in a Scooby-Doo van at the end of this and drive away. Like, that wouldn't work.
It turns out the demon was really Old Man Pazuzu. I would have gotten away with it if I hadn't fallen down these damn stairs.
Old Man Pazuzu from the Ooze Farm. He's just been making ooze for the kiddies.
What's the secret of it? We may never know. It's that it exists.
Daddy, next time you need to watch Wizard of Oz for the first time, that's not possible. I've seen that. Several times.
Be our next Halloween movie. I'm glad I'm 3 for 3 though on showing you Halloween movies between this, Candyman, and The Fly though.
That's true. Well, and then the next one's a movie I've seen before.
Yes, that doesn't count.
That doesn't count, yeah.
But you can always...
Now that you say that, I am kind of wishing now that the ritual was always you show me one I haven't seen yet. But
I am excited to talk about Silence of the Lambs. That movie's awesome.
I haven't seen that in forever.
And because you mentioned not being sure if Sarah will like this, you can always use that as like a testing ground because, it's got a lot of that same vulgarity in places.
Yeah, do you think if she can handle that, then she'll be okay with this? Because I do think this is on a little bit of a different level.
They're very different, but I also
doesn't it depend on how it speaks to you? It maybe depends on how it speaks to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
It maybe depends on how much it resonates with you. Because I thought this was, definitely scarier. Like it bothered me more.
Yeah, and I would say that this is a scarier movie than that is, but they're not kind of going for the same thing, so it's gonna hit you in a different way.
Connor says the next time he's in town, he wants to watch The People Under the Stairs with me.
People Under the Stairs is awesome.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. No, that's a great movie.
One more thing I meant to mention.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't like an exciting thing to end on or anything, but I was surprised by the name Reagan in 1973 because I thought Ronald Reagan being president is what popularized that. I didn't know that was a name earlier than that. And like I know Reagan was around in politics, but that can't be who she's named after.
I wouldn't think so.
I wouldn't think. So I got to look into the etymology of that.
But she is a Hollywood actress.
Well, that's true. Oh, that's
Reagan, the actor.
The actor. Who's this vice president? Jerry Lewis.
Dan Schneider says I do a perfect Buffalo Bill impression, except it's Plinkett.
I suppose the Secretary of State is Jane Weinman.
Who's the Minister of Finance? Pazuzu.
Okay, let's go ahead and hang up our hats tonight. Thanks a lot for being here, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. We certainly did. Luckily, we were able to get through it, and I'm sorry it's so late, but thanks for being here and sticking with us live. Thanks for watching after the fact. Also, I think we managed to get everything back in that we were talking about at the beginning of that other video.
Yeah, I think so. I think it all sprinkled its way throughout.
We should be able to get away with just leaving this as it stands on its own.
Mm-hmm.
But appreciate you guys. We're going to bid you farewell. We'll see you again next Friday with another one of these, actually. Like Austin said, like he alluded to, we're going to go ahead and watch Silence of the Lambs next week. And then we'll get back to the Superhero Rewind commentaries the week after.
Mm-hmm. Well, since apparently I have a good Buffalo Bill, I'm just going to do that entire video in that voice.
Oh, that'll be a weird one to do that with. That's another kind of serious movie, Austin. Are you sure you want to do that?
Oh, yeah, it'll be funny. Would you watch me? I'd watch me.
It's a little movie you might have heard
Watch
of. It's
me
called
so
The
hard.
Wizard of Oz.
The most famous movie ever made.
F you, Paul Feig.
Yep.
I'm getting loopy now. All right.